Hey, what's up? We love Burger King grilled dogs. They're made with 100% beef, and they're 100%. They're so good, they make us want to sing like... I can't believe it. Burger King made a grilled dog. Made with 100% beef. Flame grilled anytime you want. You can try it in classic or cherry cheese.
Flame grilled and made with 100% beef, starting at just $1.99. Get a grilled dog now at participating Burger King restaurants. Flame grilling hot dogs since 2016. Price and participation vary.
Blog Talk Radio.
Peace and greetings, everyone, and welcome to Civil Alerts. This is your host, St. Asha, here with you live and direct on this Thursday, August the 29th. Tonight for that live edition of More Insight. Tonight we're going to continue with the Treaty of Peace and Friendship with Morocco, and this is part 2. On last week, Thursday, Taj and Abdullah, we went in and we pretty much talked about the underlying information in regards to the geography and clearing up concepts that many may have when it comes to speaking about the treaty and dealing with exactly the whole construct of what actually includes Morocco. Tonight, we're going to go in and talk a bit about some other historical components in regards to the Articles of Confederation, Articles of Association, the Continental Congress, and the Northwest Ordinance, with a focus on the letters also that George Washington had actually written that George Washington wrote and sent to Muhammad ibn Abdullah, which was the Sultan of Morocco. And we're going to talk about a couple of the key elements, the articles within the treaty, and speak about the enforcement of the treaty. Also, too, we're going to open up with looking at the differences between a republic and a democracy. Some time ago, Taj had mentioned the Soldiers Training Manual, TM 2000. And in this particular manual, it actually outlines the definition for a democracy and a republic. And this was published on November 30th, 1928. And these excerpts are located within a brochure that was made available through RB Bay Publications. And if you all have placed any orders, you pretty much should have this at hand. So I'll just start off with looking at what they have here. Underneath, and again, this is the Soldiers Training Manual, TM 2000, United States War Department. For a democracy, and this is TM 2000-25, 118-120. Democracy, a government of the masses, authority derived through mass meeting or any other form of direct expression, results in a mobocracy. Attitude towards property is communistic, negating property rights. Attitude towards law is that the will of the majority shall regulate, whether it be based upon deliberation or governed by passion, prejudice, and impulse without restraint or regard to consequence. Results in demagogism, license, agitation, discontent, and anarchy. For a republic, and this is TM 2000-25, 120-121. It says their authority is derived through the election by the people of public officials best fitted to represent them. Attitude towards property is respect for laws and individual rights and a sensible economic procedure. Attitude towards law is the administration of justice in accordance with fixed principles and established evidence, with a strict regard to consequences. A greater number of citizens and extent of territory may be brought within its compass, and it avoids the dangerous extreme of either tyranny or mobocracy, results in statesmanship, liberty, reason, justice, contentment, and progress. So with this in mind, was looking at the whole concept of the mobocracy connected to the democracy in regards to the government actually being ran by a mob where there's really not respect for individual rights on the whole, whereas with this democracy too, and we can see that daily when there's tons of statutes, ordinances on the book that pretty much abrogate the liberties of the people and override the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution, along with the laws of the United States and international treaties. and of which, when it's in a supremacy clause, when we're dealing with those previous obligations, which will include the Articles of Confederation, of Association, the Northwest Ordinance. We're going to talk about that to give a more solid foundational overview of these different bodies of law. So without any further delay, I am going to bring on Master Teacher Taj Tarik Bey. Islam Taj. I think we got a little issue going on here. Let's see. All right, yeah, we have a little, some technical difficulties coming on with the line. I'm not sure if you all can hear me. I'm just going to open up the line to do a quick test. Caller 707. 78466,
and it's best to call within business hours of 9 to 5. All right, thanks so much. I look forward to meeting you.
Islam Taj?
Islam, I just got back in because they shut me out a couple times.
Oh, right. Yeah, I got locked out for a minute, too. So I don't know. Were you able to hear the intro when I was speaking?
Just the beginning, right after you read the training manual, it shut out.
Oh, all right. Yes.
And my screen indicated the call restrictions.
Wow.
You know, they're tapping the phones again.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah,
every time that there's something hot on the table, that happens. But, you know, nevertheless, what they say, the show must go on.
Yes.
Yeah, so, you know, Taj, like always, you know, I appreciate you being here. And I'm glad that, you know, you're here to bring more light into the darkness. I appreciate you. I really do.
You know, one of the things that everybody needs to do, and I think a lot of times when we're looking at, you know, government, we're looking at constitution principles, we're looking at treaties, etc. I think it is very important for all the listeners to be reminded to understand the politics of North America and the modern world, that the great negative influence in governments across the planet, particularly in North America, with what is known as forced servitude, slavery, etc., for that to be properly understood, and also for them to be able to understand the agreed deists who agreed with the Moors to set up the United States in order to bring some peace and tranquility to the world between the Muslims and the Christians. The people must have a background knowledge of those deists that worked along with the Moors to set up the United States. And those deists, amongst those deists, are known as Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, etc., that are usually written in history as the alleged founding fathers. They were participants, but they were not necessarily the founding fathers in the concept that most people believe them to be. And they were deists. It must be understood that they were not right-wing Christians as is propagated by the Europeans, but indeed they were deists and running from the church, who have been terrorizing the world and who are terrorizing the world even today. And even when you look at that training manual, the democracy system that has been undermining the republic actually belongs to the church and is actually a branch of both the barristers and also deputy knights operating for the Inquisition operations in the Western Hemisphere. And that's the very reason why the republic was set up. But you must understand, and everybody must understand, that diametrically opposed order of government known as the fraudulent democracy system is indeed the secret arm of the church to carry out the Inquisition operations in the Western Hemisphere. And this is why you'll see even across the country with many of the police departments where they have these profiling against Asiatics, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, all indigenous people. They have this profiling program for running townships. Understand that comes from the democracy order in contradistinction to the oath of ethics that all police officers must take and all law officers must take. And it goes contradictory to the Constitution. And understand that all the corporate states in the unions, in order to be a party to the union, must have a Republican form of government. And you can see that in Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, the American Constitution for the United States of North America. And so while we're annotating both the treaties, the Ordinance of 1787, etc., the Constitution for the United States, North America, people must keep in mind the Inquisition operations that's in the shadows that has been causing all these problems, including the wars, including the war machine, that industrial complex that President Eisenhower talked about in the 54 area, that belongs to the popes of Rome. And so the dynamics of the injuries to the world across the planet today, and particularly to the Asiatics of North America who have Asiatic African descent, all of your economic problems, the packing of the jails, the destroying of the families by the Christian black codes all come directly from the church, including the Christian black codes of 1724, which was adopted in all the states after they closed the Freedmen's Bureau in 1868. And so when we're looking at these documents of organized government, whereas they're to be put in place to secure the people's rights, you must know why those documents were put in place. And so you must have a broader knowledge of world history and not just merely looking at it from the perspective as they teach in the schools with the alleged founding fathers. In actuality, they were Europeans who were running from Rome. And this is one of the reasons why in your Treaty of Tripoli, etc., Treaty of Peace and Friendship, it describes that the United States was not founded on the Christian religion. So keep that in mind while we go through these different annotations tonight concerning the law of the land, etc.
I see. So when you say deists, is that just like one that would be like universal in their mindset and their consciousness?
Deist. Now, deist is spelled capital D, E-I, deist, S-T-S. Deist. Actually, deist, deist is derived from the word deity, and the word deity is derived from the word Diauti, and Diauti is actually the name of the planet Mercury, which is one represented by one of the golden candlesticks in the book of Revelation, which is at the foundation of the 7 Elor, which is represented by 7 golden candlesticks in the book of Revelation, also represented by the 7 counter-rotations of orbital planes around the cube or Kaaba in the ritual that is made by Muslims when they do the Hajj. Because the culture of the planet is really cosmogony or cosmology, whereas you get the symbol of the crescent and the star, which represents the moon and Venus, etc., also in a metaphysical way.
All right, y'all. I think Tasha's line dropped. I'm going to try to get him back on real quick. In one moment. Just put a little bit of break music here.
Can you hear me?
Right, yes, the line had dropped there. I heard you when you were saying that when you look at it in a metaphysical way, and then the line had dropped there.
You look at cosmological symbol. As a matter of fact, the symbol is called Cosmo, and that also metaphysically represents the egg in the womb of woman, as both the moon and Venus symbolize both fertility and fecundity, etc. And as truth would have it, the moon governs the flow, the rhythm of the blood, and it also governs the rhythm of the rivers and the oceans and the waters on the planet. And we call these rhythms the tide. And also the dew in the morning that causes the water to come up to feed the plants from the earth, which is like the opposite rain, and all of this is governed by the moon. And so even when we're dealing with plant life for feeding humanity, when you're dealing with root plant, stem plant, leaf plant, or seed or fruit plant based on the type of agriculture or horticulture that's being applied for farming and for cultivation, all scientists of earth or horticulturists and farmers will go to the mathematics of the stars by virtue of an ephemeris, and which would be reduced into a chart forms in almanacs, and they would plant within cycles of the moon for the best crop, etc. And it must be understood that these divine laws of nature are part of the foundation of true religion. And, of course, the popes of Rome wanted to shut that down because they wanted to enslave the world. This was one of the reasons why the Nicene Council of 325, at its core, also was the keeping of Easter, and this is when the stars in the east, when Venus comes into the eastern skies, and it comes low like the bright and morning star, and then the crescent moon comes low in the east too, and they almost meet. And this is where you get the symbol in the ancient world of civilization on the planet of the crescent and the star, which is known as Cosmo. And, of course, when the star is in the east, this is where you get the symbolism in the matriarchy systems of government on the planet, which is called Eastern Star, because the star is now in the east. It is also symbolized in the rituals of the studies of the heavens with the ancient Yahudi, which some people refer to as Jew, but that's an improper statement, or Hebrew, but there's no J in Hebrew. J didn't come into the language into the 1400s in common use. And so the letter J was never used in the ancient world because it was not part of the alphabet. But anyway, so the study of that also, that period of time when the gates of the east are open is called the East Gate or the Aries Gate. This was also referred to as Easter, the vernal equinox, Ishtar, and the Passover. Now, the same process or the transition or the precession of the sun through the ecliptic, and of course the movement of the planets, which is the truth of the religion on the planet Earth, was being suppressed by the popes of Rome so that they could control the food and so that they could put people in slavery, and anyone who was attached to the divine workings of the earth and the heavens were referred to as pagans, which means people of the earth, or heretics, which means people who did not worship the popes of Rome as God. Having nothing to do with Allah, Elohim, Tetragrammaton, the ancient principles, etc., but actually the popes of Rome, and then they hid behind the word Jesus that they made up, because the one who they refer to as Jesus at the 325 years after they assassinated him, they used some of the philosophies of Krishna from Hindustan, which was ancient Peru at that time, and made up a character, and then they voted to rename the character Jesus, and they made that up in the Nicene Council, and then they used the word Jesus as a password, and they hide behind it for world conquest because people think that they wish well on the world when actually they are the murderers of all the prophets. And so the Arian heresy, this is them referring to the movement or the procession of the sun through the heavens as being heretical or against the popes of Rome's capacity to rule the world. And this is where you get the Arian heresy and the keeping of Easter issue that was brought before the Nicene Council of Constantine, Pope Constantine, and the Roman rulers for the design to conquer the world 325 years after they murdered the Nazarene. And then they created a creed that they named the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed, which is the Creed of Constantine, and then they translated all of the books out of their original tongues and burned a lot of the literature, and then started propagating to the world that Jesus founded the Constantine religion, which today is referred to as Christianity, when actually he had absolutely nothing to do with it. Mind you, that is not to condemn Christianity as a creed necessarily, nor people who claim to be Christians. It is only to expose the truth of what's really going on the planet and in the politics of the world. And, of course, people who don't know real history think that it's a spiritual system when actually it's a political system of the popes of Rome. And including the Christian black codes of 1724 that are used to destroy the Asiatic families of North America, who they have branded Negro, Black, Indian, Latino, etc., came directly from the church, and the policies still exist today, and it is hidden in government under the code word democracy. And so that must be recognized and known. So when we're referring to the democracy, you can put the word in parentheses underneath of it, Inquisition.
So Thomas Jefferson, John Quincy Adams, even Thomas Barclay, so they pretty much were a part of the whole, the Reformationists, or the people that were just trying to escape.
Exactly. And so when you hear a lot of the politicians talking about the United States being a Christian country, they're lying. Because the founding fathers were deists. And as a matter of fact, all of them, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, who was later appointed ETC, all of them were deists. And deist is a cover-up word for the ancient mystery schools of Hikupta. And the cover-up word for Hikupta is Egypt. And that's the capital of dominion of the Moorish Empire. And all of those founding fathers also had Korans. And in secret, they had fezzes, and they would wear Moorish garb and the rituals of the ancient Hikuptans, or what you call Egyptians, and that would be referred to in these days as Masonic regalia. And the two most important symbols in Masonry across the planet today is the Moorish fez and the equilateral triangle, which is known as the Great Seal, or that triangular pyramid jewel that they wear around their necks with multiple levels of jewels duplicated after the pharaohs of Hikupta that they refer to in history as Egypt, capital dominion of the Moroccan Empire. And that study of the ancient principles of cosmogony and Isis and Horus, etc., which is symbolized in the church by the duplicated imitation symbol of Jesus and Mary, is symbolized as mother and son. And the study of mother and son is referred as Ma and son, or Ma Son Re, Masonry. And those who are the students of the ancient mystery schools of Egypt are known or called by the church as deists because they study deity, from where the term deity is derived. And the popes of Rome consider all deists, or all people who really study the truth of nature, as being heretics or atheists, meaning that they're atheistic from the popes of Rome, but they disguise it as if the people who really deal with the truth of nature, they pretend that they're against the Creator and against Jesus and the prophets, etc., when in fact it's really the Romans who have placed themselves on the throne of power, claiming to be God, as demonstrated in the second book of Thessalonians in the Heliotext, which most people refer to as the Bible. And in fact, and in truth, the Pope of Rome is actually the Antichrist they accuse everyone else of being.
So
and their political arm that's destroying both the economies and the world is known as the U.S. democracy. That's their war machine, still in operation.
Two things before we go further in. And what you're saying, is this why that communion is taken, where they actually take the wine or the grape juice and say that it's symbolic of the blood of Jesus Christ and that they should drink it? And then from looking on the outside, it really is like a vampire ritual.
It really symbolizes them devouring justice. Jesus means justice. And it actually represents them devouring, because they're the beast that's represented in the book of Revelation. Even with the birth of any truth, or the evolution, or the disposition or dispersion of any truths amongst the people, the Romans stand by like a beast while the woman is pregnant, and just like the mind is pregnant, that people would be waking up. The same way they keep on interfering with these calls and shutting down, keep on shutting down the radio when code information comes to the common people that's basically been preserved in their secret orders and is being exposed to the masses. It is the same principle where the beast stands by with the woman who is with child waiting for it to be born so that the beast can devour it, eat its body, and drink its blood. And so it is the ritual with the beast of the pit. And this is why they stand behind a pole pit, because that's a metaphysical symbolization to imply that they're angels of the light when they're really angels of the dark. And it's right really actually in the people's faces, but people have a tendency to go with their emotions rather than use their common sense and recognize that they're doing it right in your face. And so the devouring of the flesh and the drinking of the blood is put in ritual. But if it was shown as it really was and is, you would see them standing there with the arms and the legs of babies, eating the babies and drinking the blood out of goblets. Because they are indeed in reference in the Bible as the beast.
So, this is heavy right here. So, with looking at the big picture, it's always been a situation where you had people who were for the good and people that were for the bad, regardless of what their complexion was.
Yes, and this would be represented in your true religious philosophy that's taught to all the priesthood, whether they're positive or negative. It is in reference to the higher self and the lower self. And the higher self is referred to the spirit man, and the lower self is referred to the carnal man. And is also symbolized in the cross. This is why when the Europeans adopted the Coptic cross from ancient Hiqupta, you will see that they take the mundane cross or the master seal, and they pull the lower polar axis lower, where it means that it's put the emphasis on the lower part of the mundane cross. Now, in engineering, and both in metaphysical instruction and in religious instruction, the circle with the cross within it is the Holy Cross. And when you're dealing with the higher ancient culture and science, it's also known as the Master Seal, when it has 3 threes in each of the gates between the cardinal points that's written over all the deaconates in the 12 houses, which are referred to as the 12 disciples, in the mansion. And the mansion is that wheel or that circle. Now, the principle is used all over the world in both religious symbolism as well as in the metaphysical instructions, as well as in the mathematics and the geometry, dealing with the procession of the sun through the ecliptic, ETC, which is the zodiac law of the world, and is also referred to in the unanimous Declaration of Independence as nature's law and nature's God. That's the zodiac law. That is the law of civilization, also the fundamental principle of the law of the ancient Canaanites, Moabites, Chaldeans, Ebri, ETC, and thus the zodiac constitution, which is the make-up of humanity based on the divine laws of nature. And this is why you have, even in the adaptation of the Constitution for the American Constitution for the United States of North America, while it is maintained in its organic form, 7 articles, which represents the 7 chakras, the 7 major chakras, also the 7 lords of the ethers, which is dealing with all your 7 days, ETC, which also all of their holy names end with Il, ETC. Now, in the churches, they will show the people the 7 candlesticks, but they will not tell them their Eloah names because they would have to go back to the true history. And so they keep things in mystery while in secret themselves they preserve the truth for themselves. This is another reason why they condemn these truths across the pulpit, but they preserve them for themselves through their secret societies, whether Skull and Bones, Kyklos, the Shriners, DAR, Union Guard, White Camellia, Kyklos, Ku Klux Klan, Knights of Malta, ETC, and 90% of all of those secret societies in secret wear the Moorish fez while pretending not to know who the Moors are.
This is something. And, you know, so, like, when you were mentioning like, the 7 Eloah,
Yes.
is this in connection, too, with how, like, a lot of tribes throughout Africa, they actually just named the children sometimes according to the day of the week that they were born on?
That's exactly correct, because everything is, that's real. That's the course of real religion. Real religion is really the study of the divine workings of the laws of nature and the mathematical and geometrical calculations put to the pen and preserved for instruction. So true religion is actually a study of the laws of nature, and it is documented, and it's provable, and it works. This is why it says it does not recognize person or station. You see? The deal is that the priesthood keeps the geometry and the calculations of the etheric, and they run government by that, and then they give it personalities and give it to the people to keep them spooked up so that they cannot use the power or calculate their activities and navigate accordingly. And the navigation or the mathematical navigation of the wheel is referred to as the carpenter's tool, which is represented as a compass and a square. And this is also why the one they call Jesus, they refer to him as a carpenter. You see? However, masses don't know the symbolism because the preachers would never tell them, because they have oaths to the popes of Rome, and the popes of Rome give them kickbacks through an agreement with Skull and Bones member Lyndon Baines Johnson, who set up the 501c3 agreement with the Negro marching preachers to keep them under control.
And speaking of that, Taj, it kind of reminds me of the emblem for that, what is called the White League, that was formed to bring about, like, terror against the ancestors, especially the politicians.
Yes.
And I noticed that in the emblem. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's why you see that cross, because that's the Holy Cross. And it's not negative. Understand, it's not a negative. What it is not understood by the masses, and also with the Asiatics, because the Europeans may do some negative things, they have a tendency to throw the baby out the bathwater, not knowing it's their own culture. You see the point? And it was the European preserved the culture for itself and condemns it to the public so he can control them. This is essentially what is referred to as your secret societies.
So this is good. So this is
what they condemn in public, they preserve jealously in secret. Because to run the planet, you must preserve the truth. Because you cannot run the mechanism of civilization with a lie. This is why they must maintain secrecy. And this is also why they will condemn anybody who tells the truth to the common people, because when the people learn the truth, you know, the one they always boast about, Jesus say, know ye the truth and the truth will set you free.
Right.
And this is why the priesthood always says, pray enough and give enough tithing, when the prophets always said the truth will free them. And the preacher keep telling them more tithing, more prayer, more tithing, more prayer, more tithing, more prayer. The prophet said the truth. You see the difference? See, the people been following the priesthood and not the prophets who they've been boasting about. You see the problem? And as a matter of fact, the priesthood would always tell the people, as soon as they started getting an inkling of some of this information, they would start castigating them and making statements like, don't question the word of God, meaning don't question them.
Or they say, oh, that's the devil that's making you answer those questions. I've heard that before.
You get the point?
Yep. So this lays a good foundational. Oh, I'm sorry, Taj. Can you hear me? Yes, I'm here. I can hear you. Can you hear me? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Taj. Can you hear me? All right. Taj, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
All right, can you hear me? This is where they set up the order of controlling the people by challenging the people not to question the word of God. And what it really means is don't question the folks who have set themselves up as God, because that's exactly who they're talking to, is their minions, their familiars, and their priesthood who have been ritually raping their babies since day one. It's really interesting, isn't it? And little do these people know that the democracy that they're talking about, if you notice that wherever the Pope's army goes in the name of democracy, saying that these people want democracy, you see wherever they go, in the name of democracy, within months the people are at war.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of destruction of the people.
Yes. And one
That's the
thing,
Pope's
too, I
army.
noticed is that the increase with the poverty in regards to food, because I can never understand how in a lot of tropical areas where it could be warm all year long, how could there be any type of scarcity in regards to food?
Yes. Everywhere they go, in the name of helping the people, in short order, you got war, or if it's war not going on, you got a despot and a dictator that's instilled or put in power by them, and then they try to imply that the people elected these people, when it's actually the war machine set up by the popes of Rome under the democracy codes that you see right in that war manual. This is why you won't see any, like if you listen to any politicians talk currently, do you hear any of them referring to the Republic? No. Why? Because 99% of them are deputy knights for the popes of Rome under the secret treaty of Verona for Inquisition operations in the Western Hemisphere, i.e. war and genocide. This is one of the major reasons why people don't even know that the Department of Motor Vehicle belongs to the Jesuits. This is the reason why they target our people, stealing their cars and trying to starve them to make sure that they can't take care of their families, to make sure that they can't travel to feed or to work to make a living without paying Rome first. That's what the driver's license is. As you can see in the democracy codes in the war machine, it says, see where it says license? That's where that come from. And the average person who don't know the real politics would never connect that, would they?
Never. No, because that's not common knowledge at all.
And this is where and why it is always said, if you don't know the past, you cannot understand the present, and you will not know properly how to guide yourself in the future. And this is why it's always say, you must know where you come from or where you were to know where you're going intelligently, if you understand. And where they say also, if the danger of not knowing history is to repeat the negatives that were committed in history. And so, therefore, for us to begin to straighten up these problems for our people and in our communities, instead of us marching and praying all the time to no avail, we need to study and get back to the principles of our ancient mothers and fathers and honor our mothers and fathers and render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, giving that Niceno-Constantinopolitan creed back to the popes of Rome and disallow them hiding behind the name of Jesus anymore and getting away with it while murdering our babies and raping the children and starting wars all over the place and stealing everybody's houses under false mortgages, which are called mortgage, which means dead pledge. And they create these dead prime beef contracts, and the pledge is, the contract is dead, and the people are signed as the pledge. And this is how they've been gentrifying our neighborhoods. And that comes directly from the church. And that's why in our communities only, no other communities in the country, only in communities where you have Asiatic, African descent, any direction within 4 to 5 blocks, north, south, east, or west, you'll find a church, all of which are spy centers.
Mhm.
And our people think it's there for loving Jesus and is there for keeping the people, keeping the popes abreast of what's going on. This is the reason why when the popes visit anywhere in the Western Hemisphere that the different corporate states must pay for his security. Because the U.S. corporation belongs to the Pope. That's why when you look into the records, you'll see that any United States laws can be dictated or changed by the Pope on his word because it belongs to the Pope. Must be distinguished from the land. It is the democracy code. And this is, again, why the priesthood was upset when Ron Brown did that novel and they changed it into a movie because it revealed a lot of truths in the entry of the movie, and that movie was referred to as the Da Vinci Code. And then two parts of it, the second part was Angels and Devils.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. So
yeah, but that's why the Pope of Rome was up in air doing all kinds of stuff. Even some people were threatening his life because he was exposing. It's just a movie, but he was exposing a lot of truth. And if you notice at the beginning of the movie, they kept fading in and out with the camera, but they kept showing the glyphs of the planets. You see, that's the foundation of true religion, the hieroglyphs or sun glyphs. You see.
This is something. So, like during the time of the late 1600s going into the 1700s, the church played a heavy role just in the setup of those initial colonies.
The church is the colony. The colony is the church.
I see.
See, what you have, this is what you have in the dynamics of North American politics. Most of the Europeans that are doing business at North America, from a law perspective, don't belong here. Only a handful are welcomed under Republican form of government in honor, in respect of the covenant of the Treaty of Peace and Friendship and the Constitution, the American Constitution for the United States of North America. However, you've got subversives who are here also, and this is where you get your contention in the politics that is now taking place. The fact of the matter is that all the levels of government have been infiltrated by deputy knights for the Popes of Rome. This is the reason why the people are economically strapped right now, because they've carried out their mission of transferring the gold via England under the Inquisition revenue document known as the 1040.
So wait, I want to make sure I'm following you. You were saying, so they transferred the gold via the IRS
document. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
The IRS document is a tribute form to England, and people think it's to the United States Republic government for taking care of their children in schools, and it's a direct tribute under the Inquisition operations to the Popes of Rome via the Queen of England. That IRS form that everybody fills out in April, you know why they fill it out, and it must be filled out before April the 15th?
Why
because
is that?
That's the vernal equinox. That's the Eastern Star. That's the Passover. You see the point? Aries the ram, before, you see?
So at the end of the day, so this is really, too, about capturing, the spiritual energies. The life force.
It is exactly that. You're in both what? A physical and spiritual war for real, and it's really no joke. The demon is represented by the democracy. You see the point? If people pay attention, it's in their face. It's not really hidden. It doesn't really take what you would call some strong, deep, meditative kind of, contemplation analysis. It's right in their face.
Right. But how you? I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yes, but with how you're breaking it down, and because I never thought about the whole thing with the April 15th, with that corresponding with the spring coming in.
Yeah.
So it puts a whole different dynamic on it. Mm-hmm.
Why do you think they murdered all them Moorish women and children during the same period, and told them that they were going to honor the law and honor the treaty in the early period, and gave the women and the children passes on the boats, and then burnt the women and the children up. And that act by the Christian Crusaders is referred to as April Fool's Day.
Wait a minute.
That's what you burnt them Moorish women and children on the ships.
Oh my. Because it had always been told that, I remember historically hearing that was just connected to, they would say pagans that were recognizing April 1st as the beginning of the new year. So this is
pagan is people of the earth. See? People
of
the earth. That's why they put a negative on it.
Right.
And keep in mind how the church got the major part of its wealth. It went around accusing women of being witches, murdering them, then stealing their estates. That's how the church got the greater part of their wealth.
Yep.
And these women do what right now to this day? Keep delivering their babies to the church on Sunday, funding their own enslavement, and wonder why their families are falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes us hypocrites, too.
Mm-hmm.
As a people. Because the same book that they boast about says that Jesus, that they keep claiming to worship, the book says he's a Jew. And if they were following Jesus, how come they're not Jews?
That's a good question there. That's a good question.
No, that's a good statement. That's an honest statement. How about that? Not a good question. It's an honest statement of fact.
Yes.
Which means they're both hypocrites and liars.
Mm-hmm.
But that truth is also uncomfortable, isn't it?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's a hard one to swallow, especially, through generations of the engineering and brainwashing and just hearing, through habit, what they learn from their families and stuff.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Taj, are you there? Taj, I think the phone is going like in and out. Taj, can you hear me all right? Taj, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm able to hear you all right.
Yes.
Yes. But I was saying that. I was just saying that due to the conditioning, being around the families and just hearing the same thing repeated over and over and over again.
Yeah, repeat just a little bit because your voice was breaking up. Still had interference. Go ahead, repeat.
Oh, I was saying that, with the people, with, going through the conditioning with the families and everything, that it's just like so many layers upon layers of brainwashing. And if they're not exposed to alternatives, the truth, I should say, then that mindset will still continue going on and on and on. Yes.
And it's that too, right now, any one of them, if they were honest with themselves, could go because the availability of information now, they can go on the site and look at the Christian Black Codes of 1724. They can look at the Black Codes of Virginia, the Black Codes of Louisiana, etc., and they'll see all those codes were put in place to bureaucratize slavery in North America by the very same Christians and backed up by the church preachers who they think love Jesus.
Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, sorry.
that this was not so hidden as the people are in denial.
Right.
And I'm not justifying, but I understand their fears because these Romans have a tradition of being absolutely and unequivocally vicious, even more vicious than the worst beast you'll find in the jungle. And so be fearful that they keep delivering their children to the church on Sunday morning pretending they're motivated by Jesus when actually they're motivated by Constantine. And this is another reason why you see the tradition in North America where the persons of Asiatic African descent who have been traditionally murdered by the Europeans will never put Yeshua or Jesus, as they say, on a wall with his hair like lamb's wool, skin like burnished brass. They will always put a Roman up there because that's really the Negro God. You go into 90% of the so-called African or the so-called, they'll branded people called black, anywhere in America, you'll see them worshiping a European and pretend it's Jesus.
I know.
Which is a reaffirmation of hypocrisy even to the book that they claim they love. And that includes all of your big-time preachers marching and praying around with all these evangelistic programs on TV and these $3,000 suits and all these books out talking about salvation. And most of them in secret are Masons and got a Moorish fez too. And every one of them been taken to the mountaintop and been seen the promised land, knowing that the North Gate is being kept by Romans, and the North Gate is the cosmological name for North America, land of the Moors.
So with that in mind, and I know you know, with you mentioning the slave codes, I see here that like in the 1670, out of the Virginia state legislature record, they make reference to Negroes, Moors, mulattoes, and all others. I would like to read this because I would like to talk a bit about like around the 1600 period to coming up to the treaty and like the things in between that, which laid like the foundational groundwork for this even coming about. I see here, it says here that, and this was the General Assembly, let's see here, 1682, and it says Act 1, an act to repeal a former law making Indians and others free. And it says, whereas by the 12th Act of Assembly held at James City and the 3rd day of October, Anno Domini, 1670, entitled An Act to Declaring Who Shall Be Slaves. It is enacted that all servants, not being Christians, being imported into this country by shipping shall be slaves, but what shall come by land shall serve as boys and girls until 30 years of age. If men or women 12 years and no longer, and for as much as many Negroes, Moors, mulattoes, and others born of and in heathenish, idolatrous, pagan, and Mohammedan parentage and countries have heretofore, and hereafter may be purchased, procured, or otherwise obtained as slaves of or from out of such their heathenish country by some well-disposed Christian who after obtaining and purchasing such Negro, Moor, or mulatto as their slave out of a pious zeal, have brought the conversion of such slaves to the Christian faith, which by the laws of the country doth not manumit them or make them free, and afterwards.
In a short order, that gives you your history and your politics that our people are experiencing today. And also it gives you an insight into the divisions made amongst the very same people by the brandings that you just read. And as you can see, the code for the destruction of the people came directly from the church, maintained by their very own statements. The interesting thing is how these so-called black ministers, as they like to, because they've fallen in love with the brand, boast and talk about their special relationship with Jesus, and you'll see them never reading the truth of the history of the church to their parishioners, do they?
No. Mm-mm.
Because they're agents for them. Now you understand why they live so well and why they have that 501c3 agreement with Lyndon Baines Johnson, Skull and Bones, and pretend it came from Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a lot of grown people across this country in cities from Atlanta to Los Angeles that actually teach their parishioners that Jesus has a bank account in Chase Manhattan, and the preacher gives him his half.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking children. We're talking about adults.
That's true. Very grown adults, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And will get mad and angry and vehemently evil for people who will tell the truth and point out their hypocrisy against their own people and against the truth and against all that is validly reasonable to the reasoning mind. Because all of that dynamic is certainly in contrary to any divine law of thinking and justice.
Mm-hmm. I see.
While their babies are packing the jails and the graves.
Mhm. And then, like, a couple of things that I see very often is they'll just state in their records, this country. And can you elaborate a bit about that? And then also, too, is it that they're really...
When they back up, when they're making reference to the country or other nation states, put it in context.
I noticed, well, like in this particular writing, I'm looking at the year of it being like 1682, but then also too in some other codes, I noticed that they'll say this country. So with that,
whenever they're making reference, they're talking about actually the United States corporation, even before the republic was set up.
So in certain cases, it would just be referencing the colony, whereas like the other land wasn't claimed or they didn't snatch it up as of yet.
Yes, because that's a juristic order. And this is back to where it's important for the common people to understand that nation states do not necessarily mean distance. They mean jurisdiction. More often than most people would know. And this is another reason why they limit proper civic instruction in the schools under Christian control. Because one of the major aspects of controlling the masses is by not teaching them the truth of the geography of politics, which means jurisdiction is what you call paper geography, which means the distance being foreign relative to jurisdiction and not necessarily to land or actual physical distance, but rather to the issue of the power and authority to do and to act, which is referred to as jurisdiction. And, of course, there's three types of jurisdiction, one being in personam, two being subject matter, three being territorial jurisdiction. And terra logically means earth or earth measure, etc., territory, etc. However, the territorial jurisdiction also determines whether or not a judicial officer has the delegated power, charter, or warrant to do business in the capacity of a judge, etc., relative to rights or the preserving or the taking of the rights of the people, etc., which does not necessarily mean distance but jurisdiction. So that must be understood by everyone when they're reading these documents, because they have a tendency blindly and for lack of knowledge to think it always means a distant land when they're mentioning the variables of the country or nation states.
I'm glad that you highlighted that, because another thing, too, can you talk a bit about the intercoastal waterways that span all the way from sometimes as far as Virginia, where people could actually just sail and come all the way down to Florida and other places? And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because I see that sometimes when we're talking about the treaty shipping agreements and things of that nature that people may just be thinking that the selling was just occurring across the ocean and not throughout the land here.
Yeah. To answer that in a nutshell, really, they must know that the Nile is an ancient trading path that was made by the ancient pharaohs of Egypt. And the Nile today that passes through the North Gate is referred to now as the Mississippi. And you have tributaries that add to the Mississippi, and is used for trade for quite some couple thousands of years. But people must know that the Mississippi was not a natural water path. It was dug. Mm-hmm. That's a man-made pathway for trade.
Wow.
This is also why at the base of the Gulf, we made multiple mounds of pyramids because we did not interfere with the path of the water. And the other issue was that the Great Lakes, which were made by atomic power, and they are ancient, they weren't natural lakes, they're man-made atomic power for having fresh water for the entire Western Hemisphere. And the path of the Nile for travel, because you're talking about the White Nile and the Blue Nile, which is also referencing the Pacific, what is known today as Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans are western, the White and the Blue Nile, with the Mississippi being a tributary for trade. And so people really need to know the old history before the Great Earthquake or before the separation of the land, etc. So everything up the middle of the North Gate was designed for trade. So that must be understood, so it's not confusing. And this what they must also know, that at different times of the movement of the moon, that path of the water will reverse.
Oh, so in a case of, like, what is it, the St. John's River that's supposed to actually go against the gravity, like it's actually going upstream?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, this is something. And I know there's a couple of people that are on the board that might have some questions, and I'm going to open up the line shortly. But this right here is telling, because in essence, so what you're saying is that the Mississippi was dug, and then there's like a highway, an interconnected network of waterways.
It is a highway. It's a trade highway.
Right.
And it was dug by the ancient pharaohs of Egypt for trade, including parts of, like in ancient Southwest Africa, the Amazon. Part of the Amazon was dug. Part of it was natural, and part of that was dug, man-made. And when people talk about the Amazon River of Africa, most of our people, not knowing their real history, keep thinking Kemet or Africa or Kibalon on the other side, ancient Amexem, when it's actually South America.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is where the Europeans have messed our people's head up relative to the real geography of the planet.
So this is why they would say the people that shall come by land or by sea.
Yep.
And if you're not cognizant of the true history of the waterways and this network of water trade routes, then people automatically think that they're talking about selling from across the ocean.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, for thousands of years, you could set sail from Manchuria or China, what you call China today, or from the Red Sea, or from the coast of the kingdom on the east side, and just set sail and go to sleep, and it take you right to the Gulf of Mexico.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we've been sailing those routes for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, when you get down, also from Nippon, Nippon would be called today Japan. And then, of course, because of the ancient technology when the land sunk after the great earthquake, you still have a lot of technology that's still operative on the bottom of the ocean. And so when you're dealing with the area between Nippon and the archipelago, that's that string of islands of the last part of the Atlantis Islands and near Florida, at different times, different cycles between the lineup of the planets, you might go through a warp. And whether you're flying or whether you're on a ship, you might just go through a time warp and disappear.
Mm.
And that's not news. They just won't tell people that.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't want people to know that ancient civilization was far more advanced than they could ever imagine. Mm-hmm. And logically, if people knew that, their God concepts that they hold dear today would collapse immediately.
Mm-hmm.
It's another reason why they hide the real history of the ancient world, because they want the people to think that we're super advanced today when actually we fell behind, mostly due to the conquest or the burning of the books and the literature and the artifacts and the history by the Roman rulers who caused the injury to the planet today, i.e. the post-war machine. Translation, the demos, the demons, the democracy, you see?
Mm-hmm. Mm. Wow. So from the time period of the late 1600s to coming up until 1786, what was transpiring?
This was to continue. Keep in mind, when you do research in the real world history, you'll see that the Inquisition, although it's still operating, did not officially end until 33 years after George Washington.
Mm-hmm.
See, the whole concept that people have that the wars only took place in Europe is a totally false concept. Most of the wars of the world took place here in North America, in the West.
So 33 years after George Washington, that was when...
That was the official date of the ending of the Spanish Inquisition of the Popes of Rome, which is a code word for Moors. So when you go look up in the war records, the Spanish Inquisition, you will see it's the Inquisition against the Moors and the Jews, both of which is referenced to us.
So all of the colonies essentially reverted back to being like republics, and then that's when the Vatican...
the colonies, those who agreed for peace. That's why the Stars and Stripes is a trading banner. That's why it's called Star Spangled Banner. It's a banner of amity and commerce. But people who don't know the history think it's the national flag. That's not the national flag. The national flag is a red flag with a 5-pointed green star symbolizing Venus in the center. The Stars and Stripes is a amity and commerce flag in union between the Moors and the Christians. And so you've got your 7 red stripes that represent the 7 Elo, and you've got your 6 white stripes that represent your 6 European trading corporations. India Company, Pacific Company, ETC, which later became states, which you would talk about the Dutch, the English, etc. So people must know that there were actually company guilds that are later called states. And in Haddonfield, New Jersey, as a matter of fact, as late as 1810, in fact, many of those corporate entities met in Haddonfield to start calling themselves states. And so people's concepts about the states of the United States are even wrong. And as a matter of fact, in law, they're considered, even amongst themselves, as what? Foreign countries. Well, look in constitutional law. You'll see that the corporate states are foreign countries.
see. So this is why in the motu proprio, how they will make reference to foreign city-states.
Exactly, because they're all part of the Roman Curia, all of them. So what they're doing, they're starting to throw each other on the bus because the nations of the earth are getting ready to go after them for war crimes and crimes against humanity. And they're trying to take the high road so people don't start walking in those buildings and making them disappear the way they've been doing to people around the planet. And so they're trying to take the high road and take the position like they're being moral or caring, when actually the very problems, economic from Wall Street right on down, is the workings from the popes of Rome right on down to the municipal corporations in the townships that's been profiling people and stealing their cars. The common people will soon find out that they're all connected.
I see, and everyone, I noticed that there were a couple of callers that have raised their hands. Feel free to press 1 if you have any questions or comments. If you're in the chat, you can dial 858-357-8450, followed by option 1, and I will bring you in. And so I was looking at this, being that all of the wars and everything was going on here.
Yeah.
When did the Northwest Ordinance of 1787?
Yes, and that deals with the determination. Now, if you pay attention, just to remind everyone, this was determining where they was determining the flavor or the character of the government as they were adopting these principles, ancient principles from the ancient Moors of the land, and particularly from the Great Law of Peace, or what you call the Iqua Confederation. This is why President Obama, when he went to Egypt a couple of years ago, he exposed to the world that the United States Constitution is derived from Muslim law, and his wife, Michelle, went to the Alhambra, the last stronghold of the Moors, before the Christians turned the world upside down. Then when they came back after they triangulated, they came back and he signed the rights of indigenous people. And this is amongst other reasons why the Europeans here who hate him will constantly say to him, they don't care how many times he goes to church, he's a Muslim, because they're really saying he knows the real history. Because they know, in fact, that he couldn't be Christian if he wanted to, because they know that he knows it's a political system having nothing to do with spirituality. And so whereas he may be trying to pacify them, by going to church, etc., they already know that he knows the truth about the history, as well as him being a constitutional scholar. So when they're talking about Obama, they're talking on another level than most of the people who are listening assume to think. The people think they're talking about a belief system. They're talking about the politics that runs the planet Earth.
I see. And so looking at some of the other dates here, so at 1777 was the year period for the Articles of Confederation. And then prior to that was the Articles of Association.
Yes.
And so when all of these were forming, these articles, they were formed by the ancestors, or was this a combination of the ancestors along with some of the albino Europeans?
Actually, predominantly was Moors. Now, you'll see, even though the Europeans have blocked out a lot of history, you'll see one of the most famous films that is preserved by Europeans in North America particularly, that was shown in the White House, that reveals, or what you call in the palace, that actually reveals some of the true history, except that people don't catch it. And that movie or that film is a silent film, and they'll show a lot of Moors, senators in Congress with coattails, suits on, sitting around doing a jigaboo, and some sitting with their feet up on the desk and everything, eating watermelon and chicken. And that movie is called The Birth of a Nation.
Mhm.
And according to how they're teaching people right now, the people would recognize, how could all these people be the major part of government when they were, quote unquote, according to the history that they teach in school, slaves? You see the whole point? But
Right.
most of the people emotionally involved in thinking, look, they're making fun of these African people, or they're making people, not paying attention that these people were government. You see?
So was that depicting like the people that were part of the Continental Congress, or that was like just way after that?
They told those Moors, and you can find parts of this in some of their history books that they didn't get rid of. Step down or die. Remember that term?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a coup d'etat.
Keep in mind, before we go further, keep in mind, Article 1 of the Christian Black Codes is the expulsion of the Jews from the colonies. See? Back to the Inquisition operations, it's just that our people don't know is that they are them so-called Jews. You see the point?
Mhm. 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 Mhm.
In other words, our concepts about Christian Muslims and Jews are totally incorrect today. Absolutely incorrect. The people today, according to how these things are taught to the people, think that they're different versions of worship systems in the totality, when actually they were economic, political systems, and also degrees that were held by multiple people, meaning that Moors were Yahudi and Muslim. As a matter of fact, different books were used for different days, and they had to know all the books, not just one. The way people deal with now, the way people are taught, they deal with either the Tanakh, the Pentateuch, Hexateuch, Bible, Torah, etc., Quran. When actually in the Muslim, in the old Moorish world, we had all the books, and you must know them all. But today they're taught, they created a divide and conquer system.
Right.
Like they'll teach you, like if you deal with one, you don't deal with the other type mentality.
Either or, yeah.
Yes, and guess what? That is a fraud position.
Yeah, I see. So it keeps everything like clouded. And going back to what you were saying, about the truth, setting you free. You cannot know the whole truth if you're thinking like in a fragmented, one-dimensional mindset.
I guarantee you, 90% of the imams, rabbis, preachers who promote that mentality amongst their believers, followers, and bill payers and tithers themselves got Korans and Bibles in their library. However, they do not let the bill payers see it, who are referred to as tozers, which are referred to as tithers, taxpayers. That's why whenever the IRS refers to people, they won't refer to them by their name. They'll say, "Dear taxpayer."
Oh, I never paid attention to that. That's something right there. And so, with looking at the Continental Congress and what was transpiring, as far as like when you said, well, during the time when they were saying, when they were looking to oust the people and telling them to get out of the seats or die, that was during the time.
What was actually taking place is what you call a transition of what you call Christians coming into power and the Moors losing power. And even in that area is reflected from that period of association right on up. This is why it's important for people to have a knowledge of world government and also the importance of Masonry in North America in particular, as well as the world, and why these Europeans have preserved what is known as the imperial divan, which is actually a duplication of the structure of Moorish government, and they just changed some of the names, you know, from still Sultan, you'll have president and stuff like that. But when you study, you go down to Alexandria, Virginia, George Washington's Masonic Museum, and you will see the reflections of actually Moorish government from the grottos, etc. It's just simply preserved by Europeans and given a different name, ETC. This is why when you study European history, you'll see Moors in all of the ancient crests of the heraldry throughout Europe, because it actually was the Moors who were the sovereigns of the planet. Unfortunately, the Moors of the North Gate have limited knowledge of their true history. And this is also why certain books like, say, David McRitchie, the Scottish historian, why his book was banned in Modern Britons, ETC, because it exposes more world history and Moorish history in Europe, etc., than 90% of your so-called, that's a qualification, so-called black scholars doing the black diaspora thing, who deliberately try to hide the real history because they're paid off by these publishing companies to keep promoting black when they know that these people are not black. And so they banned David McRitchie's history books because it tells really a lot of European history, and logically you would see the connections right on up even into the colonial world. And so that book was banned. As a matter of fact, as late as last year, we was looking on site to try to find some because they hadn't been in the local bookstores for a minute. You can find them now, but as of it was about a year and a half ago, we were on looking for a copy of it on the site, and they had paperback as high as 1,800 notes for paperback.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, I found volume number 2 in the gallery the other day. I picked it up because apparently the people didn't even know what the book was. I asked the sister who was at the store, I said, do you know what this book, do you have the other volume? No, we don't. I said, do you get backup? Well, no. Did you ever look at this? No. And then she's ringing up the cash register.
What you say? She don't know.
Yes, it's banned. You understand? And also, even in relationship, for people's concepts to be correct, the more correct the two, because in order to know African history, you must know world history, because Moorish history actually is world history. And this is another thing for everybody, all the listeners, so that you don't get caught up in this mystery idea that world history is green people in one corner, orange people in another corner, white people in another corner, purple people in another corner, black people in another corner, and the pinstripe people over there on the mill, on the mountain, and you're talking about no matter what color you are, history type stuff. All that stuff is a fiction created by Romans for world conquest and dividing the people against themselves. There's only one history on the planet. It's called Moorish history. And if you want to know European history, you can't know European history without knowing Moorish history. Therefore, go into European history and African history to understand African history.
Looking at the whole picture. And with that in mind, can we talk a bit about the chopping down of the cherry tree, that time period, and what is the significance of Independence Hall and Carpenter Hall?
Yes.
In Philadelphia.
It's really called Pennsylvania House. It's now called Independence Hall, but write that down, y'all. Pennsylvania House. In 1774, about that time, this was, they were well on their way in the process of reconstructing history and thus stealing the birthright of the Moors. And I want to remind everybody, too, this is, again, why traditionally for the Mummers Parade, why they while the parade is large, they assemble in a small area to prepare when they begin their march, and they begin it at 6th and Moore Street in Philadelphia, and march west, young man, Horace Greeley, turning 90 degrees on Broad Street, going north, passing the old battleground that's designed like a mosque and Ionic architecture and designed just like a mosque, and that's called City Hall. And then it has the Law of the Moors in the courtyard with the 4 gates, the glyph of the earth, and that's the Zodiac Law of the Moors right in the center of the courtyard. And then to the north is the parapet with Billy Penn standing on it, 23.5 degrees facing east by northeast to the Grand Masonic Lodge, whose gates are Moorish architecture, and that is where the Mummers Parade ends traditionally. And so Pennsylvania House, what's known today as Independence Hall, is where they got together and plotted the removal of the name and nationality of the Moors on an official process, although they had been systematically doing it in what you will call casual jargon or in everyday speech, etc., gradually, and also where the Europeans were taking on the social political status title of free white persons, which they could not be. And this is where you have the birth of the Knights of Columbus Ku Klux Klan oath in Philadelphia, 1854, and also up to 63 in Chicago, Illinois, which is the sister city for Mecca, and Chicago is often referred to as Mecca. And, of course, your triangulation between Chicago, Boston, and Philadelphia, that triangulation is also an old passage route for trade that the Moors had used for thousands of years also. And so this is why that triangulation between Boston, Chicago, and Philadelphia has been so important in North American history, while a lot of the details have not been emphasized by the European conquerors here. If you look at the subtleties of the business, etc., you'll see that this triangulation plays an important role. And, of course, Philadelphia used to be the old capital before they moved it, etc. And Philadelphia is built on a series of chambers and passageways that are thousands of years old, and you have a lot of artifacts and valuables that are actually stored under this city that you know as Philadelphia, etc. They say Philadelphia is Philadelphia, etc., and it's actually ancient. And this is another reason why when they're doing any excavation in this geographical area known as Philadelphia, they will not just use security fences that are for the general blocking of open areas, but they will make them solid as opposed to just having net or wire fences, because they don't want the people to discover a lot of the artifacts that they find deep under the ground that are ancient. Some of them are older than the artifacts that they'll find in Hikupta that you call Egypt. And this is an old place. And this is the land of the Moors. And they refer to this cosmologically as the North Gate. And we're talking about the cosmological gates of the cardinal points of the etheric world, i.e. the planets, etc., and that these major cities at the north are laid out with the measurements of the stars, etc. And so this is very vital, the knowledge of the cosmological layout of all the cities, Chicago, Philadelphia, including the 7 hills of Rome is referred to as Washington, D.C., etc., is relayed out absolutely astrological and with the glyphs of the truth of the culture of the North Gate embodied in all the architecture, in the design, in the layout of the streets, etc. If you look at them from the air, You'll even see the bird with his wings spread, with his feet, etc., with all the major buildings, including the Supreme Court's, etc. I'll make sure that in one of my books I'll show you the layout of that. That is totally astrological in accordance with culture, etc., including the glyphs of all the major lords of the 7 candlesticks that you see in the book of Revelation, as well as represented by that same ritual that's made in the Hajj, etc. So Philadelphia's Carpenter's Hall, Pennsylvania House, that's called Independence Hall, was where the transition, or what you would call one of the major legs or the final legs of the transition of the Moors out of power and the Europeans coming into power took place at those places, etc. This is why even in Pennsylvania House, why they covered the walls, interior walls. Those are not the interior walls that are really there. They have skins over them. They have covered up history, even right in Independence Hall, or what you call Independence Hall, which is Pennsylvania House. This is also why they did the movie National Treasure at Philadelphia, and also why they did the symbolisms of the Great Seal, the emblem of the Moors, the insignia of the Moorish nation, as well as the symbols of masonry with the actor Nicolas Cage running around in Philadelphia, and then also with the ending of the movie where they show you that the treasures of Egypt are right beneath the people's feet all the time, and they think that Egypt is only on the other side. But they're sending signals, they're telling the history, but it's done in like novel form or movie form, but they're even telling you part of the truth of the history. So again, Philadelphia is an important city, and people have no idea that there's a city beneath this city that is unknown to the masses.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, the Borscht building that's right there across the street from Independence Hall, there's chambers underneath those buildings that lead right to the Delaware underneath the water. It's just that it's covered up.
This is something. So when all of this was transpiring as far as them trying to cover up who the ancestors were of the people, during that time, that is when, so the whole idea, so the whole concept about the chopping down of the cherry tree is just in regards to all of the activities that was going on to cover up everything.
Yeah. And
it's not the literal take. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's symbolically, the cherry tree is symbolically the Moorish flag, the red flag with the 5-pointed green star in the center. The red and the green is also referred to sometimes as the cherry tree or the red rag of Africa. And George Washington, who was a general, was brought into the palace on word by Chief Justice Ben Bey, who's referred to in history, the great mathematician, referred to in history as Benjamin Banneker, taking the place of Benjamin Franklin, who was guaranteed the praetor seat under the authority of Sidi Muhammad, Sultan of Morocco, as he, Benjamin Franklin, was minister plenipotentiary, and this is where you get potentate in your secret societies. Plenipotentiary, minister plenipotentiary Benjamin Franklin, minister plenipotentiary John Adams, minister plenipotentiary Thomas Jefferson, with Thomas Barclay as agent in business, 1784, negotiating under the authority and the protection of the Sultan of Morocco, negotiating a treaty with the Empire of Morocco, also coming into the nuances of establishing the Ordinance 1787, determining the cares of the indigenous people they would refer to us as Indians, though we're not Indians. These determinations will be taken into consideration during the ordinance before the adoption of the Constitution, etc. So it must also be referenced that while the European call us Indians, he knows that we're not, and they know that we're Moors, and they know that only reference comes from the logs in England relative to Colombo's records when they were trying to take over the spice trade of the Moors near Madagascar in Hindustan that they call India, and so they refer to us as Indians of the West, although we're not Indians, etc. So that must be remembered so that the people know how to read history, etc. And anyway, so it must be understood, the more and more you look at the early history, you must look at the world history, and you'll see why Obama revealed to the world that the United States Constitution is derived from Muslim law. You must also recognize when you deal with the transition from the Articles of Association to the Articles of Confederation to the Declaration of Independence into the present-day Constitution for the United States of North America, that all of those instruments are in operation. They were not dissolved. That's for anyone who may think that those were dissolved, their concepts are wrong. As you will see in Article 6 of the present-day Constitution for the United States of America, that all debts and contracts or engagements entered into before the adoption of this Constitution shall be binding against the United States, not for the United States, binding against the United States under this Constitution as under the Confederation. So as you can see, the Confederation is still in operation. And all treaties made or which shall be made in pursuance thereof shall be the supreme law of the land. So you see why the treaty and the Constitution must be looked at as one document, as it is the supreme law of the land. This is another reason why the European school teachers don't want the Moors to know about the treaty, and also why it's important for them to keep continuously calling them black, because if they call them black, they don't recognize themselves in history, and thereby having no social, economic, or political protection, not knowing that they're actually the descendants of the sovereigns of the land, i.e., the Moors, by birthright, by primogeniture, by freehold status, and by inherited right. And so it is important politically, from a negative, yet politically important for the Europeans and their paid-off Negro marching preacher leaders to continue to call the descendants of the Moors black in order to keep them under the Christian black codes, and that the corporate states can escheat all of their properties and their inheritances. And this is also why the popes of Rome, through the marriage code set up by the daughters of the American Revolution, claim ownership of the eggs of the wombs of the women. And this is where the Mar Code, which is referred to as the marriage code, claims ownership of the uterus by the popes of Rome, and therefore all the offspring of the persons held in servitude are referred to at birth as wards of the state. Therefore, the birth certificate, B-I-R-T-H, is converted into a birth certificate, B-E-R-T-H, and is used for shipping and dealing with what you'll call your stock market, etc. And this is where that the popes of Rome, via their priesthood, control the womb through the marriage certificate and the birth certificate, etc. And that has also much to do with that which took place in Philadelphia House, Independence Hall, and Carpenter's Hall. A lot of the deviant intermixing of the agendas of the popes of Rome, countering actually the founding fathers. That must be remembered also. Go ahead.
I see. You know, we had a caller that's been holding. I'm going to bring them on. Before I do that, just a quick question. So in regards to the issuance of, like, all of those certificates, so has this concept of investing in this international trade and the stock of the people, this is ancient, it's been going on for a long time. Did this, like, predate the 1930s?
The people are the stock. In other words, the people themselves don't know it. They are the stock. And keep in mind, and for the scholars out there, and for people who doubt this, keep in mind with the closing of the Freedmen's Bureau In 1868, they immediately created the artificial corpse. And that corpse became what is known as the artificial person, the corporation, with the 14th Amendment, and they made the people dead and listed our people as civiliter mortuus, which means dead in the view of the law. They created the artificial Negro brand, registered in the state of Delaware, and the 14th Amendment, and then made sure that all persons of African descent that were released from slavery could not transact business unless they did business in European names, and everyone who did business or trade in those European names, all of their estate automatically became the property of the state, and they themselves became known universally as, quote-unquote, stateless persons. And this is the function of the 14th Amendment for the bureaucratization of forced servitude in North America under bond, and the people themselves are bonded.
And that's the true story of the bondage.
That's exactly what the bondage is. It's not a chain. It's actually the 14th Amendment and all the Christian documents put in place, making the people think it's legitimate government when actually it's stock trade of themselves.
I'm going to open up the lines here. Caller 814. Thank you so much for your patience, and welcome to Silver Alert. Please state your name, where you're calling from, and your question or comment.
Islam, this is Amani calling from Japan.
Islam, good brother. How you doing, good brother?
I'm doing well. Good to hear you. Long time no talk there. Taj, good to hear you there.
Yeah, good to hear you.
And Taj there.
Yes, good to hear you as well,
very interesting, very stimulating discussion as always. I just wanted to share with the family some information related when St. Tasha started asking about the crafters of the Articles of Association and the Articles of the Confederation being Moors. Now, if you notice in their institutions, they don't really discuss or talk about whom they call the framers or who they are actually. And there's a reason for that, because they teach in their institutions that it started from Washington, correct? And you notice they don't go back. They don't go back and discuss the individuals during that time. So there's a reason for that. Now, one very famous president whom they taught, freed the so-called slaves, Abraham Lincoln, very, very famous, and they had a couple of movies last year that came out about Lincoln. But, Lincoln has been misrepresented to the world. And, of course, during his time, him being a Moor himself, during his time, you had what was called the Peerless Three. Lincoln, Hitchcock, and Randolph, Beverly Pascal Randolph, three Moors. Of course, Randolph, the Grand Master of the Rosicrucian Order globally, who wrote most of Lincoln's speeches, provided the spiritual side for Lincoln. Now, I have a book by William H. Herndon. Now, William H. Herndon was a lawyer and a partner with Abraham Lincoln at the same law firm. So he wrote a lot of letters about Lincoln and shared them with his friend, and they were eventually published. And it's called The Hidden Lincoln. Now, I'm going to share some of this here with the family here. Now, this is on page 54, and he says, as to Mr. Lincoln's religious views, he was, in short, an infidel. Now, let me stop. That's a code word. So when they refer to an Asiatic as an infidel, what they're basically talking about is he's a Muslim or a Muslim.
Yes.
You see, and then let me continue on here. It says here, he did not believe that Jesus was God nor the Son of God. And then it says here, Samuel Hill was the man who burned up Lincoln's little infidel book. Lincoln told me 1,000 times that he did not believe that the Bible were revelations of God, the way the Christian world contends. So now we just have facts about Lincoln being an infidel. And so we know what that code word means. Now let's just go a little deeper here. When, you know, the elder Taj is talking about, you know, Equipta being in the Americas. Now, during the reconstruction of history, you know, when you're reconstructing history, you're actually reconstructing language. You see, so language that we use today was different than language back in Lincoln's day. Just to give an example of that, and on page 104 of William Herndon's The Hidden Lincoln, it states here, and this is Lincoln talking to an acquaintance, and he said to his friend, there's a story on the circuit down in Egypt, the lower part of this state. The state that he's referring to, the state that's called today Illinois. So during Lincoln's time, Egypt was South Chicago. So and in this here book, The Hidden Lincoln, they use that term Egypt hundreds of times. It's littered throughout these letters, referring to the southern part of Chicago. So there's not a coincidence that the prophet was set up there in South Chicago, which at that time was referred to as Egypt. Now, of course, today, people living in South Chicago don't call it Egypt today due to reconstruction of history and language. Now, let's get deeper into the physical description of Lincoln. And now, this is William Herndon speaking here. He says, do not say anything about my supposed theory of Lincoln's paternity, as it will be liable to misconstruction. I have the facts of Lincoln's paternity, but have never given them to the world. So now, in this book on page 413, there's a physical description where he says here, it is now time to describe the person of Mr. Lincoln. His body was well shrunk, having very dark skin. Let me repeat that. Having very dark skin. It didn't say dark skin, very dark skin. Now let's put that expression into modern terms. Can we say that Elijah Muhammad, would you consider him as being very dark?
No, not at all.
Okay. Would you consider, let's say, Adam Clayton Powell as very dark?
No. I'm thinking of the black and whites I've seen of him. No. Mm-mm.
Right. Would you consider Bill Clinton as very dark?
Of course not. Mm-mm.
Okay. Would you consider Michael Jordan as very dark?
Yes.
So now we're getting somewhere. So here we have facts of a physical description of Lincoln, about his religious views, about during his time, Egypt was in South Chicago. You see, so it's evident there, and there's no coincidence why the current President Obama, during his campaign, he was had all this Lincoln energy. You know, the course that Lincoln took during his campaign, Obama did the same thing. You know, so of course he knows the real history of Lincoln and his religious views and what he looked like. You know, that's not a secret for him at that level. But so I just wanted to share that with the family there, and we see more evidence of the history that they told us. Here's facts disputing that. And so we know that whatever they tell us from their institutions, it's all, for the most part, hogwash.
I hear you on that. Thank you, Amani. So this pretty much explains why when the movie Lincoln had came out, the first scene, it opens up with him right there with the Moorish brothers who were the Confederate soldiers. And then throughout the movie, I noticed how they had the red sashes that was being worn by his son, and his son always looked as if he was reading a Quran, because it would show the book closed with the fine, nice, ornate, like the Moorish designs and the geometric shapes and stuff on the cover. So this explains this. And I did not know that the infidel was a code word for Muslim men. That's something.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
They don't refer to Christians as infidels.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So. So again,
yes, and keep in mind too, the Article 11 of the Treaty of Tripoli, which says that the United States was not founded on the Christian religion, very clearly.
Indeed, here. You see, so the last vestiges of Moorish control, even under the Constitution, President Lincoln was still very strong during the late 1800s, because it wasn't only Lincoln. It was the military wing with Hitchcock, and the spiritual side with Pascal Randolph.
Yes. Yeah, and including with that, when we look at even with President Monroe, as a matter of fact, it was even with the Inquisitioners, secret Treaty of Verona, including the preachers and the priests, with their oath to the popes of Rome, that was really the stimulus on the construction of the Monroe Doctrine. Was actually came because of the first session of the Congress, 64th Congress, in actually as late as 1916, which was really read into the record, and that was the motivation for the Monroe Doctrine. And, of course, you already know when you go into the Monroe Doctrine, you're dealing with acts of state. You see?
Right. Exactly.
Again, that would give people insight into understanding the politics, past and present, coming from Carpenter's Hall and Pennsylvania House, which is called Independence Hall, right on up to today, ETC, to understand the politics. Because, one of the things that we have to make sure that people understand is like what Ramani's saying. If you don't know world history, or if you don't put history in perspective, your concepts will absolutely be wrong. You cannot look at present-day history without having a background in world history. You cannot, and then understand it or comprehend the motivations of the politicians.
Yes, exactly. Yes, and because and it's all designed, of course. The connotative language that are currently used, and so if you make the mistake of trying to retroactively apply that to ancient times or even 150, 200 years ago, it's a misapplication. So which means that it's a fraud.
Exactly. Even and this is redundant, but to remind people again of the dynamics of the Inquisition operations at North America, and even what happens in what is called, quote unquote, the so-called black community. And this is what all the politicians know, the real oath of all the clergy. Like our people know they got churches every 4 blocks in any direction in the so-called black community, but they don't even know that their preachers, their clergy, got an oath to the popes of Rome because they think they're delivering them to Jesus. And here's the secret oath of all their clergy, Article 3 of the secret Treaty of Verona. That's even read into the congressional record. Article 3, convinced that the principles of religion contribute most powerfully to keep the nations in the state of passive obedience, which they owe to their princes. The high contracting parties declare it to be their intention to sustain in their respective states those measures which the clergy may adopt with the aim of ameliorating their own interests, so intimately connected with the preservation of the authority of those princes and the contracting powers join in offering their thanks to the Pope for what he has already done for them and solicit his constant cooperation in their views of submitting the nations. And so you can see in our communities, they think these preachers are submitting them and delivering them to Jesus, and they're delivering them to the popes of Rome, very clearly.
Wow. Indeed. Yes. Yes.
Yes, so.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that there, and you know, again, you see, through the miseducation, they would love to just lump Asiatics in one bowl, but you have to remember, you know, we all have different nationalities. Asiatics have different nationalities, and so, especially in many of the wars that had occurred between Asiatics, you know, so they had different nationalities, different agendas, you know. So due to that, it's not as if they want to paint a picture that we're all just one, and we had peace forever, you know. So again, we were talking about the history of Europa, and again, you know, the nobility of Europa. There were Asiatics. So you know, the founders of the Virginia Company, as I stated many times, Charles II and his partner, Sir Francis Bacon. They founded it. They were the majority shareholders of the Virginia Company, which is your current U.S. Corporation, founded by Moors. You see, so just because they physically look like you doesn't mean that, you know, you're in harmony with them all the time.
Right.
See, so a lot of those wars occurred between the Asiatics of Europa and the Asiatics of the North Gate because of due to resources, due to the slave problem. Because the real slave problem were the slaves they were bringing over, you know, and those that slave institution was huge in Europa because the Moors used their slaves for thousands of years. So they started dumping them all over the planet. That also caused issues.
Yeah, and Brother Maury, this is why Drawley said to the Moors, and he said the Europeans over 3,000 miles from home, you're going to take on a lot of water, and he also says, you know, when you get back in power, to treat the European nice. So the Moors must know that on both sides they're equally guilty of this corruption, and this is also why Noble Drawley said to the Moors, he says, the Negro problem is your problem. Some of the Europeans are helping me. Why are not you? The Negro problem is your problem in reference to the Moors of the North.
Right.
And so with what you all are saying, and looking back at the letter that George Washington had written to the Sultan in 1789, is this why he was, it states where he regrets the hostile disposition of those regencies towards this nation who have never injured them?
Because some of the regencies did not want the Romans established on the heartland of the empire. And that's the North Gate, what you know today as North America. And this is why you see in that letter where he says, you know, where he confirms their attachment to the Moroccan Empire. And so you can see the United States is an appendage of the Moroccan Empire by George Washington's letter alone. This is the reason why that letter is not in school books.
Oh, yes. They don't want that getting out, but, you know, they don't want to let that cat out of the bag there.
I see. So is this why also, too, because I have heard a couple of people say that judges have actually came out and said that this particular treaty does not pertain and cannot be used because it's in regards to maritime law.
Well, they can say what they want to say. This is, look at this. That statement is even designed to try to discourage people from looking at the treaty.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you look at Article 6.
Exactly.
Article 6 of the Constitution it says all debts and engagements entered into before. That's a qualified word, isn't it? Before the adoption of this Constitution shall be binding against the United States. And they're trying to tell you it ain't binding. I say that it is.
Right.
You see, the deal of it is that they didn't want these people to become conscious. Because once they became conscious, they would recognize that they weren't brought from any place, that they're aboriginal and indigenous to the land and are the firstborn primogeniture, true freeholders, etc., and are paying taxes to a foreign European fake imposter government who are pretending to be Americans, and they're really demo operatives of the Popes of Rome continuing the Inquisition operations. And the very fact that they become conscious alone, all of their marching and praying and fake paid-off Negro organizations would collapse overnight, wouldn't they?
Yep, exactly.
Which means, so once the slaveholder loses his power of overseers amongst the persons held to servitude, now they start losing control, particularly when these people start recognizing they're standing on their own land. You already know what that means.
And they're going to continue to do that, to trip you up. That's their job. You know, they're going to sit there, you're going to come at them, and they can say, oh, no, that's the law of the seas, it doesn't apply. Or they'll say, oh, well, this is not Morocco. Morocco is over in some other location. So they're basically, counting on the fact that you don't know the true meaning because you're caught in the connotative meaning of words, and they're going to trip you up. So you just have to, stand in your square and take it up to a higher level. And then once they recognize that, then they're going to have to abide by the oath and the real contact. I mean, for example, the state, as Taj just read, Article 6 of the Constitution. All previous engagements entered into before the adoption of this Constitution is valid against the United States. You see, so, but the judge is counting on the fact that your level of knowledge is not as high as his. So his job is to keep throwing, counter arguments at you to break you down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. To make you think that, Morocco's over there. To make you think that, that doesn't apply. Morocco is a different jurisdiction. That's over in so-called Africa. And so you get caught up in that. They're not understanding language, not knowing the history, and so that's why they continue to win, unfortunately, there.
Mm-hmm. So with all of that in mind, when those Negro CX were instituted, that was in total violation of the treaty.
Exactly. And this is why when you look into your congressional records and you look at the expatriation, United States citizenship, it tells you bluntly that the only way the Moors even lost their nationality is by naturalization. So you see the 14th Amendment's role?
Mm-hmm. I see. And we have another.
Law.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm. And that's the United States law, and it says that straightforward and specifically.
I see. And we have a caller that's been holding as well. I'm going to bring them on. But Amani, thank you so much for chiming in and bringing this information. Appreciate you. I'll be talking to you soon.
Peace, good brother. Good to hear you.
It's fine. Same here. Talk to you soon. Take care.
All right.
Peace.
Islam, peace and love. Caller 216. Thank you for your patience and holding, and welcome to Civil Alert. Please state your name and where you're calling from, your question or comment.
Oh, my goodness. I'm so upset. That was an accident that I hit the number, and I was really enjoying you guys conversing with the brother.
Oh, all right. All
right.
then.
Thank you.
Right, You're welcome.
Peace and love.
All right, peace and love. And you know what? Yeah, I don't. His line just dropped. But yeah. All right. Well, Taj, we're edging on where it's about to be 12 in a moment, and this brings another sharper dynamic to this. I have to tell you, Taj, every time we talk, it's just like a whole different level and clarity to these matters. Yes, and we didn't get a chance to go.
We have to think broader. You know, one of the things that we have to do with all of our people is to get them out of these little confinement baskets of concepts of human development and human interchange. They've got to expand their mind to the rest of the world and stop being in a corner or in a Negro basket.
Mhm. Yes, indeed. And I would encourage everyone to get a copy of the treaty book and to read the articles. We didn't get a chance to go into everything as far as the articles. There's about 25 articles here listed. And so this will definitely be something to reference. And Taj, maybe, depending on timing, we may, if you're open to doing like a part 3 to highlight just a couple of the key articles.
Yes. One of the things I want to do, too, particularly with Santasha, we're going to get together because we're talking anyway, is that I'm going to send you a delegation of authority, and I'm going to send you the masters of both the treaty book and the MSTLA degrees so you can have them down there, and when people need it, they can get them from you.
Oh, all right then. That'll be good. All right. Yes, because this information definitely has to get out to the people. Definitely.
Yes, because again, in order for us to really start to address the economics in our community, we've got to tie the people back to the land in order to tie them back to the resources.
That's true.
You know, and just emotional marching and praying and groupifying ourselves is not how do you say, it's not sustainably rational because it's not really dealing with what the real problem is. The people are mentally in a state of disassociation. They're disconnected from the land. The corporations are controlling their resources, and they're looking for a job. You see the problem?
Yes. Yes, I do see it. Because I had even, I spoke to an elder this past Sunday. She had been working for over 30 years for a university, and they told her that she was not entitled to a pension. And then when it came time to deal with the Social Security, she was getting a little bit of a runaround. And she had so much despair, and she was saying that more than likely she's going to go and get another job until her full benefits come in from Social Security. And so just, you know, talking to her, I was just thinking like, oh, my, this elder should not even have to be dealing with such a thing. She in her own land.
All right. Now let's slow down. This is for the public, and this is for you too, because we can expand on this information. And I'm going to reiterate just what Brother Amari was saying, and what I'm going to say to you right now. Whereas our people need to get out this emotional, in this black corner mentality, and understand the real politics of the world. You know why she's having problems with Social Security? I just read you the secret treaty of Verona. She thinks she's getting some check from the Social Security Administration. Isn't that the assumption?
Yes.
Well, guess where it comes from? It comes from the IMF, as all the seats of government have been transferred to the IMF. And that's in relation to the dissolution of the United States Corporation, which is operating in name only, and reflected now even as late as now with the Pope of Francis of Rome declaring mutuo proprio, the apostolic letter where he's throwing them under the bus because a lot of them people getting ready to hell for war crimes. And she ain't getting a check because they ain't damn money. Do you understand?
Yes.
And that goes for a lot of other people that are playing with her because guess what? They They can't move it like they used to move it. Do you understand? Because the fiat is being withdrawn, because it's going down to nothing. And nations of the earth are cashing in all their U.S. corporation T-bonds. And so she's in the education system and don't even know the function of that check that she's seeking. You see the problem?
Yes, I see.
That even the educators aren't educated. And that's not a slight on her, but I'm just saying she needs to get on Civil Alert and study. Because the only way she and a lot of other people are going to save themselves is that they're going to have to get in their proper person and claim and put a proper declaration out on their estate and try to preserve what they got left and live through this storm and come back home. That's what they need to do. Because ultimately the only ones who are going to survive is one to have a claim to the estate, because they ain't got no money. And they're not allowed to handle money because all the real money has been sent to the Popes of Rome via the secret Treaty of Verona, ETC, and the Inquisition operations, with a power side of it initiated by Woodrow Wilson and backed up by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And if they think they're going to escape it, they got another thought coming.
And Taj, too, I want to talk to you about bringing this to the elders so that they can understand. Because, like in this lady's case, she's about 63, about to be 64. And
and she's another piece of. She, like many of our people, are another number and another piece of throwaway disposable human flesh under the book of Revelation. What's that? Chapter 13, where the beast is devouring. They have no conscience.
Right.
And what I'm saying to you, we need to stop looking at the emotions of these things and tell these people to get on board and help us get this work done, because this divine and national movement is their movement too.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, I want to thank you again for being on, Taj, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If I didn't get a chance to bring you up on the board, apologies, but you all can always send your questions direct to news@civilalertradio.com. Again, that's news@civilalertradio.com. And we'll be connecting with you on Tuesday night at 9:30. And remember, the goal at Civil Alert always is to be informative, engaging, and third eye opening. Peace and much love, Taj, and peace and love to everyone out there. Sleep tight and have sweet dreams like always. And I always have to tell y'all, remember to download the shows after every broadcast and circulate them, send them to your distribution list, and spread the word. So y'all have a good night.
Good night. Peace.
All right, peace.
For 50 years, Kawasaki has been defying convention and building masterpieces that have revolutionized motorsports. Come celebrate Kawasaki's breakthrough products like the jet ski watercraft, Ninja motorcycles, and Mule side-by-sides at the Golden Anniversary Sales Event from April 1st through June 30th. Great financing is available, plus sales incentives on select models at participating dealers.
Visit Reba Motorsports in Pompano Beach before June 30th to take advantage of these great offers.
For 50 years, Kawasaki has been defying convention and building masterpieces that have revolutionized motorsports. Come celebrate Kawasaki's breakthrough products like the jet ski watercraft, Ninja motorcycles, and Mule side-by-sides at the Golden Anniversary Sales Event from April 1st through June 30th. Great financing is available, plus sales incentives on select models at participating dealers.
Visit Broward Motorsports Kawasaki in Hollywood before June 30th to take advantage of these great offers.